finish line does not end when the project is complete. You know, you probably have to do like close to 25% more effort to be able to share it online and get more work like that. The wider accepted advice would just be, if you distill things down into a standard process, it just helps you so much. Why they want me to specialize? It sounds like creative hell. And the more I began to specialize, the more I realized there's actually more nuance in the nitty gritty than in being a generalist and just being like, I can do whatever you need me to do.
All right, Connor. So you told me in the pre-interview that you are self-taught, and yet I go to your website and I look at your work and it's well designed, it's well animated, it's very technical, it's like spanning multiple screens. So I'd like to start by just hearing your story. How did you actually learn to do all this stuff?
Yeah, 100%. Pretty much the quick rundown, try to wind back. I've been in this not too long. It's been maybe 3 or 4 years total, but obviously before then there was like design,
Wow.
like graphic design, like the high school yearbook thing. My mom had a t-shirt design business, so I was a crappy graphic designer, but made like logos and stuff for that. So I always kind of had a background in design and just kind of added skills along the way to like unlock a new tier in a new industry that I would just stumble upon, like, oh, this exists, so I can like pursue this. So it was never clear to me the path. It just kind of unraveled itself. But I would say like graphic design was very first, if I were to distill it into like a skill, and then photography and then videography, and did some of that stuff in college. So really I was just curious and relentless in the pursuit of learning all these skills. And then all of a sudden motion is like, hey, like I'm here. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'll look into motion design and looking more into that. So it was kind of a natural revealing of that in my college days. And then and now we're here and niching down and doing all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to dig in on the design stuff specifically, because like, you know, I guess I'm self-taught too. I mean, I went to college and I got a film and television degree, which, I mean, it's probably worth the diploma that it's printed on, in terms of the actual skills I learned versus what I do for a living. But, you know, it's one thing to learn how After Effects works, and you can get on YouTube and there's lots of tutorials and there's courses and stuff like that, but it's still very hard to be a good designer and to learn how that works. I'm curious how you approach that.
Yeah, great design is at the center of all motion design. Like all the best motion design I see out there is less motion intensive if it's like 2D, and more design intensive. So I was always infatuated with these style frames of like companies like Tendril and like all these big studios that do amazing work if you were to pause the video and just look at it as an artboard. So I always knew that, okay, if they're pausing this to show the appreciation per frame, it's going to look good if you hit play. So as long as you can make something look good in a still, that's probably where you should start. At least that's what I thought. So, and I kind of reverse engineered that in a way to design the frames first and then just animate between the frames. It helps me operationalize everything and not get all this anxiety when I open up After Effects, if that's where I was starting, which I don't start in After Effects. But yeah, I have a lot of opinions about like the university for artists, for sure. Like it's not always super useful for artists to go to university, but it's great for early exposure, just quick exposure of a big brand if that's something you want to tap into. Because I mean, after all, that's what you're paying for, like the socialization of everything and the access to the premium brand assets that can potentially get you. So, yeah, I would say like going to university served me a ton in that way. But I can definitely see why it wouldn't be that way for everybody if they didn't want to go into an avenue that required immediate access to premium resources to kind of, you know, jumpstart your career in that way.
Right. Now you're known, you know, at least on social media as like, you know, the sports guy, because that's mostly what you do. Did you work on your college's, you know, sports graphics, Jumbotron stuff?
Yeah. See, I started not in sports. I kind of have a sports background personally. I love sports for what it was. So it kind of gradually, like, you know, graphic design, then video and photo, and then motion design with the thing. And I was like, well, can I combine all of these interests and add maybe one more niche in there? So sports motion design. So turned out there was a whole industry online that I didn't really know existed. And I've heard you talk about in the past, like sports design kind of has a look, right? That 3D, glamorous, shiny. It has this look because, in my opinion, I think because of the tools in the back end. And I thought there was this huge opportunity to come in and build a bit more like art directed and stylized, just lean in more to the art of the brands, because a lot of these brands are redesigning their teams and a lot of these stadiums are getting new visuals and boards. So it's a perfect kind of mix of opportunity. And going to university, I went to University of Oregon, so they're big on sports. And actually originally I went there for product design. So like 3D modeling and like, I don't know, making one of these. So a lot of sketching and 3D modeling, but I think I like the fast paced energy of sports. Obviously that's like the worst thing part of it too. But what I ended up doing was just working for free and being an intern for their athletic department and just getting my hands on as much projects as possible and soaking up as much information and industry knowledge as possible. Because I knew this is something I'm really passionate about. I wanted to back it up with just a relentless pursuit to like understand, like to get a better grip of where things could go from there. Because I knew I wanted to be more of an independent artist in that way. So yeah, we're just working for free, getting hands on as many assets as possible, premium assets. And then obviously the next bit of that was sharing what I learned online. And that ended up helping me a ton, which was kind of an accident.
Interesting. Okay, so you go to school, you're working for free, so you're actually paying to work.
Yeah, negative. Not free.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, yeah, but I mean, a lot of people start that way. And so then from there, how did you start getting paid for it?
Yeah, I remember. Let's see. I'm trying to recall like how that all happened and what could be helpful for people listening. So I was doing a lot of work and learning a ton. I feel like I knew enough. I feel like everybody knows enough if they're nicheified enough to be able to share expertise online. So I was doing projects here and there. I'm like, I think I know enough to be able to share something that would be of value to somebody. I don't know. I was one of the people that was kind of anti-social media and didn't really want to post anything because I knew of how much of a grind that was. And if I were going to do something, I want to do it full off and really well. So
right.
I remember it was the first, I guess, just a quick story, I guess. We were filming a jersey shoot for a football player because every single, Oregon with their jerseys, they do like a shoot and it's like a big thing for them. So we would always have a shoot a week or like between 3 to 4 days before the game. So these were called the media days, the jersey shoot release media days. So I would gather video and photo for these type of events. And I just kind of had a personal project going into my junior year where I wanted to get a hyper stylized shot because I had this concept of a visual effects scene that I can manipulate in After Effects pretty easily and execute something that I thought wasn't really done before, just to spruce up the whole game day promotion piece or the win asset that can potentially be posted after a game is won, hopefully, or hits the graveyard if they lose. And so, I took on that project kind of as a personal project. And because you're working for free or negative, like you're saying, you get access to a lot of great things because it's like, of course, like, yeah, like do your thing, right? So I had the opportunity to get footage of things and kind of execute a personal project. And then it was essentially a visual effect shot for social media. That's all it really was, hyper stylized to promote a game day for the football team. And so I ended up going through that process and posting how I did it online after it went up online, and people really enjoyed it. And I ended up getting people reaching out in DMs saying, hey, could you do the same thing for our school? And like, oh, I guess I can, but not really, because I'm not there in person. I can't like get the shot. It's hard to explain to someone else how to get a hyper stylized specific shot to edit and visual effects and After Effects. So
yeah.
All that's to say is I ended up just stumbling across the concept of I do this thing. It's hyper specific and niche. I don't know if anyone out there can receive any like valuable information from it, but I'm going to post it online and just to help, whatever. And people ended up being interested, but not only interested, and they wanted that for themselves too. So that was a formula I observed, put together. I'm like, shoot, this is great. I can claim the work that I did. I can share expertise on how it's done and be of value to other designers like me, which I didn't know there was a ton of there, out there. But, and then I can also get work from this online. So this is great. Like, I can extra money to fund the bar trips with the boys, So it was just kind of random. It revealed itself.
That's really crazy. I mean, when I was getting into the industry, I almost had the opposite idea, which was that I need to make sure that I have a portfolio that shows I can do it all, and that way I'm appealing to everybody, and that, you know, if you appeal to everybody, now there's more people out there who can hire you, and to me, that's what a generalist really is. It's someone who can, you know, kind of slot into multiple roles. But and it sounds like it was kind of by accident, but it seems like, I mean, if you go to your site right now, I assume you've done other types of motion design projects, but 100% of what's on your site right now is sports graphics. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about that, like, you know, that choice of trying to generalize or specialize, and you have hyper specialized.
Yeah, 100%. A lot of things that I can say there that I can share that was helpful for me for sure. But I would say I started off generalist, just soaking up everything. Like, obviously, you know, graphic design, photo, video, visual effects, motion design, and then whatever's beyond that. Like 3D, I would say, is after that, but I kind of found a sweet spot that I really enjoyed the 2D case. And because I can do it on a laptop and still travel and see parents, friends, wherever. But yeah, I found, like, I read a ton of, like, books and video podcasts and all these things. Like, Blair Enns was great. He was a great resource. Both his books are excellent. Chris Do was great. There's a few other resources I read online, and they just harped on the idea of specializing. It's like, why do they want me to specialize? It sounds like creative hell. Like, I don't want to be boxed into a corner. Obviously, that's the fear of all designers, is I don't want to do the same thing over and over and over again, because it loses the spark, and that's why I joined in the first place, right? So that's what I thought. Right. And the more I began to specialize, the more I realized there's actually more nuance in the nitty gritty than in being a generalist and just being like, I can do whatever you need me to do. There's more power in being a specialist in something. You're the go-to option for someone, rather than like a commoditized version of something that you can be comparable to all these different people, and you're indistinguishable between all of these other people, which is fine for some things. But if you find something that you really enjoy, I would say that it would serve you tremendously to be like, this is my thing. I don't do anything else. Like, maybe I do other things, but I don't want to broadcast that I do those, because I don't want more of those things. I want less of the things that I don't want to do and more of the things that I enjoy doing, you know? So I think there's a sweet spot there. Maybe there's an idea of being too niche, but I found that it's served me more than it's hindered my creative abilities, if that makes sense. But I don't know, what's your experience with that?
Well, I mean, I guess it can work both ways, right? So, like, you know, I usually tell people, especially when you're starting out, if you specialize, if you go in and on day one you're trying to specialize, the big problem is that specialists tend to be really, really good at their specialty, because that's what they do all day, right? And so you've done, you know, dozens of sports graphics projects. You're very good at it. You've got this portfolio. So if a new person came in and decided to specialize in that, it might be harder initially to gain traction than if they have a more general reel that shows that they're pretty good at a lot of things, right? And so when you're trying to get your foot in the door, I think maybe being a generalist is a little bit easier, you know, to gain traction. However, in the long run, and what I'm really think is that, like, especially on social media, you know, you get on LinkedIn and you see there's a lot of animators right now that are looking for work, and some of them are amazing. Like, their reels are ridiculous, right? But they're generalists. They don't have like a specific thing that they're known for, that they're one of the top 10 people in the industry at, right? And so as good as they are, it's a little bit harder to like see that portfolio and immediately know, I'll use them for this. Yeah. But the stuff you're posting, it's obvious, right? Like if I need someone to design, you know, animated stuff for my arena, I call Connor, right? It's just so obvious. And so I think on social media, your strategy makes the most sense, actually. Were you surprised by how much work you've been able to get this way? I mean, because, you know, I mean, like, I'm probably underestimating how many arenas and stadiums and how many potential clients there are for you. I mean, you know, like, I'm into sports as much as the average motion designer, right? So probably like this. You know, and I know every state has multiple major league teams, NHL, NFL, NBA. You've got, you know, like, other continents. You've got Europe. Every country's got soccer teams, and there's multiple leagues there. You've got rugby. And so I don't know, if I sit and think about it for 5 seconds, it's like, I guess there probably is a ton of that work out there. But it seems so niche that my initial gut was, is there even enough work? Could I even make a living doing this?
I think it's been a coveted industry, maybe, if anything. But yeah, there's a ton of work, and I would say like for the whole social bit, like it's ideal where your buyer is, and obviously by nature this is a B2B like luxury service. That's really like, if you distill it down, that's what it is. So where are the clients like hanging out? You know, like are they on LinkedIn? Are they on TikTok? Are they on Instagram? Are they on Twitter? I didn't know going into this that they pretty much were hanging out and sharing a lot of information on X. The sports community is extremely niche, like design wise, on Twitter, but they're very active. They're on it all day. That's what they do. They post, and that's how they interact. It's less, you don't have all this noise of all these other short form, like vertical video format, like social medias. LinkedIn is great because it's the people in more executive positions making decisions on behalf of teams and brands. And it's extremely untapped, and the quality of social like content on LinkedIn. I'm sure you like everybody knows LinkedIn is kind of known as the cringy version of the social media, is it because it's like self-promotion, all these things. So like X and LinkedIn, like those have been awesome. Like for me, I haven't really dived into TikTok and Instagram. I'm sure they'd be great, but this is really all I can handle at this point, while still doing an excellent job. But yeah, the bit about the specialization, it's like how are you being perceived? Are you broadcasting the fact that, hey, I can help you with this one thing really well, and I don't do this? Like that's to a buyer's, someone like coming across anything. You know, you don't want to look at a product online and be like, well, they do a bunch of things pretty good, but I just want the best of this one thing. Like the internet has the distribution to be able to find the best of the best for literally every little thing. So I think because of the way it's set up in technology and social media is the way it is, it allows for this hyper specialization and still tap into this massive boat of work if that's what you want to do.
Yeah. So you mentioned in the pre-interview a word that I use all the time, which is talent stacks. Okay. And, you know, I think one of the ways that you can niche down is not necessarily by going like super deep into one niche, but it's by having a unique talent stack, right? So you're a good animator, you're a good designer, you know After Effects, right? And that's a talent stack a lot of motion designers have. Do you think there's other skills that you have that you've picked up over the years? You know, maybe your videography background, because I know a lot of times with sports graphics, you have to direct football players to look cool on camera and stuff like that. Are there other things on your talent stack that you think have helped you be successful in this world? Like as an example, I interviewed years ago this awesome artist named Monique, and she basically completely pivoted from being a 3D artist to drawing the most like hand-drawn looking little characters and making little GIFs for social media. Basically, that was what she was mostly doing. And she had this talent stack of like, you know, illustration plus 3D, like hardcore, like modeling and like, you know, using V-Ray and stuff. I mean, she was like a beast. And then, but the complete opposite of that. And that's pretty unique. And so it helped her like sort of basically have two careers going at the same time while she built up the things she wanted to do. So that's, to me, that's kind of unique. You don't see those two skills together a lot. So I'm curious if there's anything like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. The more odd of a tech stack, of a skill stack that you have, technically the more niche you are and the more differentiated you are. And like you can't be comparable. It's like real estate. This luxury house, it has like this pool that has, you know, a waterfall outer edge or whatever, and it has this yard that wraps around to the front and garage that goes two ways, like you go to the backyard through the garage too. Like all these unique elements, like if you think about it, real estate, this makes it, I can't compare this house to this house because the value discrepancy is like, well, it's all whatever the buyer wants it to be. And so you're going to be putting yourself in a better position the more skill stacks you add to your repertoire. So with that being said, I would say like I've found the biggest growth moments or aha moments I've had didn't come from adding another creative ability. Like creatives, we're already killer. We're great. Like I see some of this work online. It's like, oh my gosh, they're just amazing motion designers. I'll never be as good as a motion designer as them. Like the way that they can, you know, think about pacing and like composition and art and all of these different things. But I found that, okay, I don't have to be that good in that way. I can be proficient in the way I like talk to customers and get to the bottom of what they're wanting to do. So I guess sales would be like that element of it, being personable, being friendly, and having great energy online. being like, I'd say social media, sales. So I guess marketing and sales is always what it comes down to for that. But if I want to tap into whatever vehicle that allows me to do the work I want to do, whatever skill is necessary isn't going to be a bad thing. It's just going to be the next thing I need to do to unlock the life that I want to live for myself creatively and like freedom wise too. If I want to be locationally free, I need to learn the skill of how to be self-sustainable on my own, on my computer, just with the internet connection, with social media, and my abilities to move pixels around on the screen and render them out and send them to a client. So it doesn't matter what you like to do, just you have to do whatever it is that frees up the life that you want to live. And for me, that was like why I do everything I do. Everything is intentional to be able to free up this lifestyle that I want to live. So I don't view anything as like
speaking my language.
I don't want to learn sales. It's like, doesn't matter. Like this is the way that you get to achieve what you want to achieve creatively. So it has to be done. And it's like, okay, well, it's just like a task then.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, dude. I love everything about that. Well, let's start digging into the actual work that you do. You know, I was looking through your site this morning, and I went to your God, it's a hard word to say, inquiry, your inquiry page. You could name it contact page. It's easier for podcast hosts. But on there, you say you've got an $8,000 minimum for any engagement, which I think is totally reasonable. You've got your availability on there. So clearly, like, you're booked, you're getting that and all that kind of stuff. Maybe you could walk us through, like, what does it look like when someone contacts you and you get on a call and you close them and you're scoping the thing out? Like, what does it look like to do one of these big arena projects? I saw you recently did the WNBA All-Star Game, you know, in arena graphics, which look amazing. We'll link to them in the show notes. Like, what does that process look like from start to finish?
That's a great question. I'll just skim through it. I've thought a lot about this inquiry process, like based on like what, as a client, what are you experiencing? If it's a luxury product, that means inquiry product or process has to be extremely luxury and super clean and like very, very to the point. So I found with posting online, if any post gains traction, you're going to get exposure to a ton of potential work, right? So you need a way to funnel everyone down and almost have a filter for weeding out the people that you want to be a great fit for. You want to be able to do your best work every single time, especially if you're posting on social, because the whole chain is reliant on you being able to post about it, you know? So, so when a client comes in and it, you know, sees stuff on social media, I never sell anything directly. Or sell, I guess you're selling an implication that you can do something or fulfill, but it's never like, hey, like, you know, sign up for this inquiry form. It's never like that. So you basically want the buyer to believe that they're finding it on their own, because they're going to make decisions and own their decisions more. And you have to validate them less in the future, or vet them, you know? So you want a process that can auto vet them, I would say. So when you get on the website, you can, you know, have a great time looking at the creativity of the case studies or whatever. And then if you end up on the inquiry form, just a simple form that asks a few validating questions. I know that there's people like Daniel, I think Priestley. Have you heard of him?
I'm not sure.
Gotcha. He's buddies with Christo. He goes online and talks a lot about like creative and sales. So if he's a resource, if that's somebody that's struggling with, I would definitely recommend that resource. I'll have to get like the actual spelling of his last name here. But so yeah, they come in and they fill an inquiry form, and essentially the idea of it is to weed out people that I wouldn't be a perfect fit for, because it's so niche. They need to fit exactly. So, you know, the minimum engagement amount is just to be like, hey, like we could do a project for less, but it just wouldn't be worth the time, because like the quantity, it's just a lot more headache to you know, onboard and do a great job, close, deliver, and make sure it's a great product for anything less than that. So there's a theoretical like limit to what, like who we can work with, because it's such a lean operation. Yeah. So yeah, social, the inquiry form. The inquiry form is just a type form embedded in my Squarespace site. That's all it is. At the end of the type form has a Calendly link. And what that...
Can you explain what Calendly is in case people don't know what that is?
Calendly is great. I highly recommend it. Like all these softwares, like...
I use it all the time. It's amazing. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's amazing. And essentially it's just a way it integrates with your calendar and finds open space in your calendar based on what the parameters you set it to, and says, hey, like book a call or book an in-person meeting. I have a roommate that does pool service, And I'm like, dude, you should be using Calendly. Like, this is great to just make sure that people know that you're on their schedule. And yeah, you can hit easy button. You can put it behind a paywall if you do consulting, all this cool stuff. So it integrates like the API it puts with this thing is insane too. I don't know how they do all these deals with all these different softwares, but yeah, it's just an online scheduler. That's all it is. But it's great because you can schedule a video call, and then I use Zapier to chain all of these things together between Squarespace as a website, embedded Typeform. The Calendly is within the Typeform, and they schedule a call, and then it sends them an email while I've given them the next steps. And then I build a Milanote board on the side, which is just a virtual whiteboard that I have a template for that I can just build out everything that I learned from their inquiry form, all leading up before our call. And then this is kind of a newer thing, but I film a Loom video just kind of outlining the process and introducing myself. So that way, before they even talk to me, they have an idea of what they need to do, what they need from me, a full rundown of what the process looks like. And because it's so niche, I know exactly what needs to be done. Obviously, there's variations within that. So that's why we have the calls, which the call is a 3-step process: exploration, a creative sync, and an offer call. And the idea is like exploration, you're just assessing fit. The creative sync, you're just talking about creative, and you've already had the conversation about budget, money, whatever. So you're free, you're boundless from the stressors there. And then the offer call is when you take everything that you learned and come up with I typically do a 3 to 4 tier offer system that allows the clients to look and be like, okay, these are the options. These are the difference. And the idea is, so much about what they need that they would be fine with engaging any amount. That way, you're not just showing a take it or leave it number. You're just showing different ranges, and they can decide for themselves what's going to be best for their current situation, because you never truly know, what their situation is. So it's like going to be impossible to be like, here's exactly what you need. And like, that can be yours if you want it, or if you don't want it, then we can't work together. Like, I just found a 3-tier offer system to be best in that. And so that's the whole inquiry process.
Can you tell me, Connor, I'm curious what's like the range, if you have like a ballpark, what's like a range of like typical budgets for these projects?
Gosh, they're so wide, and the scopes are so wide too. It depends on the team and the industry. So let's say like for college is one thing. It can be sport specific, or it can be athletic wide. Those ranges can be significant. It can be just a media day background. It can be an entire athletic wide graphic package, for every single sport. So that can be anywhere, from that 8K range that approach like 6 figures and beyond. And those deals typically are like just huge projects that probably need some additional help, and I'll contract some other freelance designers if need be. A ton of 3D. I don't do 3D, so I'll definitely contract some beasts there. And then for anything professional, like I found there's not really a set amount for the sport. Like NBA doesn't really have a set amount. Like MLB doesn't have a set amount. Like I've done a ton of packages in every industry, and I don't think there's a specific amount. So, but the range is anywhere between those two amounts that I talked about. But that's why it's so hard to understand what the scope is. So you have to, that's the inquiry process, have to find out exactly what they're needing, like itemized wise, and then you go through it.
But like if a college reaches out and they're like, we need a graphics package for the baseball team or something like that for their stadium. I guess what I was really asking is like, are the budgets like real budgets?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Because, sometimes there's these prestige kind of things. And I think sports graphics is a prestige kind of area in motion design, right?
Yeah.
Like title sequences and Super Bowl ads and stuff like that. There's just, but sometimes those things don't pay as well as you'd think, because I think the clients understand at some level that there is some prestige to this. So you should give me some consideration, because this is going to look good on your portfolio. But it sounds like, I guess an easy way to ask would be, if you took the project rate and how much time you worked, are you getting a decent day rate from doing this?
Yeah, I don't honestly know what my true day rate is. And I think there's a bit of me that doesn't want to know, because I don't want to distill it down into an hourly form and be like, this is my worth as a human, it's my hourly rate. I almost don't even want to know.
That's philosophical.
I don't know why. Maybe that's a hindrance of mine that I need to self-audit. Like I technically could find it out with the spreadsheet. Like I know exactly what the hourly everything is on cost breakdown. Like some teams are great in terms of realistic of what's possible, and some teams really lean in on but this is actually a good thing for you. Like technically, like you should be thanking us sort of attitude. And because both exist, that means that the sample size of the inquiries coming in just needs to be big enough to get enough of the people that don't do that. So you're always going to run into clients like that have that attitude.
Yeah.
And there's a time and a place for that. Like I needed that at one point for sure. Like people need to be able to access great work. But at the same time, if they're accessing great work for a discount, that means there has to be a different value add. So maybe the ability to share online with more detail, and that's something I need to negotiate in every single project. But you need some other value add, or you need to make it worth it on the back end to go the extra mile to make that worth it. Like if you're taking a hit money wise, you sure as hell need to be posting online about it and show your creativity and how much of a beast you are online, to leverage into more work that could possibly end up getting you access to clients that aren't as price sensitive, or that allow you to give you a correct budget to do a kick-ass job on this without any stressors. So I would say, the sample size is the key there because both exist.
Got it. Okay. So you've built a sales funnel. This is great. So you're using social media, primarily LinkedIn and X. That's driving people to your site. People land there. They go to the inquiry form. You've got a type form, which is just another software that lets you make forms. Okay. Really useful. And I think it's cool that you're pre-qualifying your leads. You're not just hoping anyone will reach out and try to give you money. If it's not the right fit, you don't even want to talk to them. And so you're kind of filtering them out automatically. Then they can book a call. You've got a 3-stage, I mean, this is pretty sophisticated, man. So you've got a 3-stage kind of closing sequence where there's 3 calls. And then finally you say, okay, here it is. Here's your 3 options. I want the one in the middle. And, okay, cool. I'm going to pay you 50 grand to do some work. What happens next?
Yeah, post-process or post-selection process, pretty straightforward. Team wants package B, right? Great. Okay. We need verbal confirmation. Obviously, like net 30, all this stuff. You can't get paid. You can't just be wired 50K. That's not really how that works.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, gosh, that'd be so awesome, huh? But yeah, so essentially all this contractual stuff has to be done. And I've had an attorney draft up everything. Typically teams have their own, SOWs, whatever. Every team has their own billing process. Typically for certain amounts, they have to also get 3 other, bids. But if they want to work with you, those probably don't matter. Bid, So that's also why it matters to have expertise in some ways, because bids could technically be a better value. But if they want to work with you as a person, and there's less risk because your whole business model is reliant on doing great work and posting online, you're less risky to them as a client. Your business model depends on sharing it online. So you're going to do a kick-ass job, no matter what, So then from that point, on the creative side, this is not business admin side. These projects, typically they're pretty large in scope. So because they're so large in scope, design is key. And typically, if you're working with a team, there could be up to 8 creatives that you're working with and collaborating with, and you don't want to overtake anyone's job. So sometimes these teams have motion designers in house, and gosh, that's some great creativity to tap into. They got some great ideas and concepts. So definitely you want to be able to collaborate with them and gather as much design. I call it design artillery, your ammunition, right? So all those vectors and cool assets that they come up with, it's just gold for motion design. Typically if it's just a logo, a font, and swatches, you can do some cool stuff with that if you add your own stuff, but the more the merrier in terms of design artillery and ammunition.
Let me ask you this real quick. Why, if an NBA team, the Celtics I know have in-house motion designers, right? So why then are they also reaching out to you? Are they reaching out to you almost as an extra freelancer to help the team, or are you kind of leading these projects because you're the expert or something like that? Before you hear that answer, I want you to know that the motion design classes we run at School of Motion are not like other online classes. They're interactive with critique on your work from your own personal teaching assistant, a 24/7 engaged community of learners, and some of the best instructors on earth. They're insanely effective, and the results our students get are incredible. So incredible, in fact, that they say things like this.
There's so much information in these courses. The exercises are incredible. In fact, they're all real world. The review process was absolutely enlightening.
I took After Effects Kickstart over the summer, and my TA was just so helpful in like pointing out things that I didn't even like think about.
School of Motion courses offer such a compelling experience. The teaching assistants who critique your assignments and clear your doubts are also a part of the industry with tons of experience. But I feel the best part of the School of Motion courses are the student communities.
Curious? Check out our complete motion design curriculum at schoolofmotion.com. Link in the description. All right, back to the episode.
Yeah, I would say they allow you to lead for sure if it's your thing, you know. Typically when teams have in-house people, their bandwidth is so full. Like they got you got to do ads and you got to do like social content. You got to do all these other things. And they don't have enough time to do while they could very much like do a really excellent job, they just don't have the time. So they need a short-term buddy that they can be like, hey, can you like sprint with us for a little bit? And then like, okay, we got what we need, thanks. And they're like, you're good to go, which is perfect because that's what we want to do too. So I think bandwidth is the main thing, time bandwidth, and talent is definitely not like everybody given enough time could do a kick-ass job on anything. So I think it's time.
Got it. Okay. Do you think there's any, you know, because I've worked on multi-screen things before. I worked on something for the Barclay Arena in my previous life, and so I know how finicky those things can be, and how there's all these extra problems that pop up with, oh, this thing is like 400 feet long, but it's actually only 16 pixels tall, like that kind of stuff. Is there any sort of technical expertise that you bring that you find most motion designers don't have just because they haven't sort of bumped up against these things yet? Or is it more or less just you're using After Effects, the comps are just weird sizes?
I would say like there's people smarter than me in After Effects for sure. I just think I've done the process so many times. I know exactly like, okay, if I need to build a ribbon, that means I need a ribbon tile, and that ribbon tile needs to be left and right tileable. So, and it needs to be long enough to be able to like paste into all the different ribbons. If they are all the same, sometimes they're all different, and have it be cool. And it has to go from right to left because people lead from left to right, and all these like little nuances that like you learn over time, right?
And a ribbon, just for people who don't know, those are those thin strips, right, that go all the way around the arena. Yeah,
a designer's dream to design for. Yeah. Those ones.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, 48 pixels tall, 14,000. It needs to be like MOV because MP4s have a limit to how wide they can be. Like all of these things. The art or the After Effects project file looks insane, and the amount of like compositions is kind of nuts because it's multiplied from the number of comps or the number of prompts multiplied by the number of screens, and then you need all screens view. Computer kind of has a hard time sometimes doing that, so you kind of have to get into IT a little bit with. Okay, like if I need to be able to do this mobily, that means I need a certain computer that's able to do this. And like now you're running into like, okay, is the compute ability running into the creative ability to execute an idea? Like that is kind of a limbo as motion designers know, like especially 3D people. Like I'm not even in 3D, and I can't even imagine like, well, that would be a really cool idea, but we only have 2 weeks. We can't sit around and wait for this thing to render for days. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I'm still learning a ton about like the After Effects capabilities and the limitations of that, and making sure my creative abilities are not lofty enough to like end up like screwing me in the end. Yeah.
Okay. So, and if you're like curious what all this looks like, look in the show notes and follow Connor on social media, because you always post these really cool. You almost post these like overview comps where you can see all of the screens and ribbons laid flat, and you can see how they're in sync and stuff. So. At what point, this was one of the things that was always the trickiest when I remember working on the Barclay Arena, which has this screen, I think they called it the Oculus at the time, and it's outside, and it's like this weird oval shape wrapped around kind of a semicircle, and to even visualize what the hell this is going to look like, you know, and you're trying to like render it and make it a texture in Cinema 4D to kind of mimic what it looks like. At what point do you start showing your clients, okay, this is what I'm making, but this is what it'll look like in an arena with 40,000 people in it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you're working with someone who's less of a creative, or sometimes they know already, the people that you're working with, like, okay, this is what the board looks like on a After Effects composition, but this is like, I can visualize what that's going to look like. But for wonky things like that, definitely like mock-ups help tremendously. Even if you have to spend a day building a custom mock-up just to be able to like show the concept, if that's going to save you, a bunch of time in revisions and also be a great piece to share online after it's said and done, it's going to be a necessary thing for you to do. We talked briefly before this about operationalizing the post completion process for online during the project, so it's perceptively like a lesser task, so you don't feel as less obligated to like share the work online after you've done all the hard work. You just have to get, that's like the finish line does not end when the project is complete. You know, you still have to share. You probably have to do like close to 25% more effort to be able to share it online and get more work like that. So yeah, the mock-ups are great in showing that, and that we've turned that into a way to actually like preview. Like we won't share individual files. If it's an all-screen view, instead of showing like the main board and the ribbon board as separate files, we'll just share an all-screens composition for them to sign off on in a Dropbox replay, which is essentially Frame.io but for Dropbox, because it allows them to see all the different screens and be like, oh, this moment tied with this moment. They can visualize what it's going to look like as a full takeover. So there's a venue mockup, which is like a photorealistic mockup. And then there's an all screens composition, which is just one After Effects composition with all the compositions pasted in there in an elegant way to make it understandable what it's going to look like as a full takeover. And then there's all the individual compositions that you end up rendering and sending over them, but you don't want to render those over and over and over again. And you can't really preview a ribbon board that's like this anyway. I don't know of a video player like you can view a screen like this.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so then you go through that process. I'm sure there's like multiple versions, revisions, all that, and then you're rendering out each individual screen element as, you know, MOV or MP4 or whatever. You give that to the client. Now, do you also design and execute graphics that need to be updated, right? So like, you know, a player's stats or something like that may come up on the Jumbotron at the beginning of a game, or the starting lineup at a hockey game or something like that. And I know that, you know, at least in the past, like there's sort of newer tools now, but a lot of that stuff was done with non-Adobe software. It was done with these bigger systems, VizRT and stuff like that. Are you working on that of the design and animation at all, or are you strictly just making sort of linear things that play?
Yeah, that's a great point. So that brings in a whole other avenue of things like, you know, Ventus and all these like broadcast live editable elements. That's kind of outside of the wheelhouse of what we do. But we do provide art directed graphic package for that, and just hand off to their team, and they have to reassemble in those programs. So you're giving them backgrounds and stuff like that. They can After Effects project files too, so they can render out, you know, things. With every product, there's pre-rendered deliverables and there's template deliverables, and everything is kind of sectioned into those two categories because it requires kind of a different approach. What the product you're building is an After Effects project file, you have to make it look elegant. And so when you pass it over, you know, maybe it's hooked up to Essential Graphics panel. Maybe the expressions link it to way to where you edit the text in one composition, it ripples to all the ribbons, and you can bulk render because you can't do a mover with a bunch of different screens, right? Maybe it uses Templater by DataClay, a great plugin that's higher ticket but worth it for these bigger scope deals, to make clear ID graphics that can render from 1,000 inputs from a spreadsheet that you can, you know, don't have to be on hand to actually render those inputs. And so there's all these different approaches, and everything is so specifically applicable. So it's hard to just give like a blanket answer, but I would say, yeah, sectioning it down between what deliverables can be pre-rendered, what can be templatized and delivered as an After Effects project file, what needs to be streamlined in a way that uses a plugin to automate the render process, or is this something that you just send as an art-directed graphic package to a team and try to gear it for them so that they can parcel it up and build in their own broadcast way? Gotcha.
So are you thinking about any of these newer tools? You know, Unreal Engine is obviously getting a lot of press right now because they released their motion design module, and that's kind of aimed squarely at what we're talking about here, you know, sort of real-time updatable, super high fidelity 3D renders, all that kind of stuff. And then Rive is also solving a similar problem, and I've actually seen examples of Rive being used as the graphics package sort of controller for, you know, certain esports things and stuff like that. Are you messing around with any of that, or are you still strictly After Effects?
Yeah, I definitely pay attention. I've actually never opened up Unreal. I've done a little bit of Blender in college. Rive, I've checked into a little bit, and I love it. Like, there's all these other things, and as designers, you have all these different tools at your disposal. And it's great, but also hindering if you end up like specializing and you become really good. It helps you to understand the developments of these different programs, but I don't know if it would help to do a full crossover, like transfer. Like for something like After Effects, it's an industry standard enough to where that's not really going anywhere anytime soon. So you can build a system off that and be reliable. And I think while those other tools are excellent, like I'm sure that you could do a great job in those tools if you specialize in those. There's a certain point you get in the knowledge of a program to where it wouldn't serve you as much to like sidestep and diversify your expertise in other programs as much as just doubling down on what you already know and maybe improving in the way that you vet a customer or that you sell them or that you present the concepts or the way that you post on social. There's other ways. If the end goal is to do better creative output or to grow your brand or to be able to grow a business or an agency, there's maybe other ways to improve that. Like what's the end goal? You know what I mean? But there's a ton of great softwares out there. I'm always like being attentive to what's coming out, the features. Yeah, I think Unreal is great like for 3D stuff, but almost would be unnecessary if you're doing a very 2D workflow like you're doing here, you know?
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about something you mentioned, which is that you have to negotiate when you're starting a project to be able to share online the behind the scenes and all that stuff. What does that typically entail? Is it just you just ask and they say yes, or do you have to kind of go back and forth?
Yeah, that's a hard one, man. I don't know. Teams are finally realizing that like to work with great artists, you need to give them the ability to share their work online too. And I think there's actually value that they get. But a lot of these institutions have red tape built into their brand, whatever, that don't allow them to do that, which is unfortunate for them. But I think eventually they'll come around and amend those, or like you have to become a partner in some capacity to be able to do that because they're associating brands and there's some liability there. The bigger the brand, the more I feel like they're inclined to be essentially white label you as a service, which I treat in kind of two ways. Like obviously, like. Yeah, the work is one thing.
Charge more.
Yeah, so I'll share kind of a workflow, like a thought process that you can go through to justify it. So where you don't be like, well, pay me more then. Like that's kind of not the right way to go about doing that, in my opinion. But so if your whole business model is dependent on you doing the work, sharing the creativity online to leverage into more work, if that chain is broken and you take on too much projects where the client doesn't allow you to do that, you don't have much of a business model, you know. So it's kind of like you kind of have to say no to things that, might be like, very glamorous and the brand is great, but it doesn't matter. And like the dollar side doesn't matter too, because you're after, you want a great long-term relationship. Like LTV is the metric for business, but you want a long-spanning relationship with the team that like treats you well, allows you to share online, maybe it has you come out and view it in person, and you want those relationships, and that's going to keep the fire going too. Like creative burnout is pretty common, and it's like I want to avoid that as much as possible by doing that. So I would say that is that aspect, and then also negotiating, like you're talking about, like to pay more for a white label service. The way I go about pricing the value of that is a calculation between the average amount of leads that are generated from a social campaign post-project multiplied by the close rate, multiplied by average package price, and then you factor in LTV of that. So that spits out a theoretical number to be like, this is what you're actively costing me. It's my blind cost of what I'm ensuing by not having the ability to post on social media. Totally cool. All that we ask is you pay 30% of that, to cover like whatever. So at least you're deriving a number that's operate like analytical and isn't just come out of right field. But to do that, you have to know your own numbers too. You have to know your close rate. You have to know what your average package price is, and you have to be niche enough to where that's a consistent number for every single piece that you do. And you need to know how many leads that you generate per social campaign, all of these things. So it serves you, like that's a perfect example of like, it serves you in that situation to confidently demand of a price, because like the heartbeat of your business, and that has nothing to do with creative at all. It just only has to do with like spreadsheets and self-auditing and nicheifying. That's why nicheifying is great, because then you can like actually confidently say those numbers and say a metric that is like you don't say with any emotion attached to it.
Well, and you have more leverage too, because it's like if they balk, there's not a million of you out there. It's like it's a little bit harder to find someone that's niche. So when you have those conversations, I mean, I love the way you broke it down, right? And just for anyone listening who doesn't know what LTV is, it's lifetime value. So if you have a customer that comes to you once and they pay you 15 grand, well, then that was their lifetime value. But hopefully you want repeat business, right? These teams, they update their branding, they update, I mean, there's like a minor league, baseball stadium in Sarasota, and they update their graphics every year. And a lot of times they actually get Ringling students to do it. So I don't know how much they pay for that, but they found a little hack. But do clients tend to let you, would they rather just you charge them more, or do they typically end up saying, yeah, you can share it?
Whenever we go that route and they don't end up allowing us to share, it's a 50-50 chance that they end up paying the price or don't go, or go elsewhere, right? Totally fine either way. Like, we don't want to do a project that they don't want to do, obviously. Like, typically they're great, and like, because they found the work online, they're like, oh, totally understand, we get it, like they're chill with it, and we just got to do some finagling in the contract or the agreement, or maybe put a line item at the end of this long ass like doc that says that you have the ability to do this. So I think you really have to fight for it, but man, it means so much to be able to do that, especially nowadays. Like, it just is such a value add to be able to share and associate yourself with a great brand, but you have to have really great quality and a really high amount of professionalism to get to the point where at the end of the project, they're ecstatic with what they got, and they're like, yeah, like, do your thing, post on social, like, we'll give you a testimonial, all of these things. Like, you want that, you just want to be homies with the people that you're working with. Like, that has to be the goal. Like, you want to be able to give them a thing that they're going to be ecstatic with. So usually they're pretty good though. I would say like 80%, that's never an issue.
That's awesome. So let's talk about, I guess, kind of your goals. So, we talked a little bit before we started recording, and it was like instantly clear to me that you're an entrepreneur. Like, I can smell it through the camera. So how do you think about scaling this business? Because you've actually, I mean, for being so young, you've done a really good job of sort of like operationalizing what you're doing and creating sort of a consistent lead source, and you've got a process for that. And you could theoretically start to outsource those things and build a company around this, and it would be a very niche company. And I'm curious just to hear you kind of ramble on about that a little bit. Like, how do you think about where you're at, where you'd like to be, how you get there, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, this is kind of an internal struggle for me for sure. And I think maybe we could relate on some of this stuff for sure.
I've been there.
Yeah. I think at any point there's a crossroad, like, oh, do I scale this? Like, do I become more of a like formal operation, like agency, right? Or can I just take technology as far as it can go to leverage a single person's, or like I use contractors too to divvy up some of this stuff. And I've tried having some extra help, like having an assistant would be super awesome. But I think there's a limit. I don't want to maybe this doesn't serve me, but I love the creative element of it. And if I just become a big bloated business, I think that would suffer a lot. And like, personally, it would suffer. But at the same time, it's like, well, like, I'm taking on a lot of work and I'm suffering because of the amount of time that it takes. It takes away time from like personal life and everything. But I recognize the short-term sprint to get all the knowledge and information condensed in one area to then you can make a bigger move life-wise. But yeah, like you said, I have other interests for sure. Like, I have a life, and I like to think I have a life outside of all this. But yeah, I think there's some other concepts that I have that I think would actually be a bit more scalable. If scale is what I'm going for, I don't think an agency is what I would want to scale, if that makes sense. It's like, the way I see it, and maybe you think about this too sometimes, but the growth model is sort of like linear in agencies. You add bodies and you add an equal amount of great output. Maybe it's a little bit disassociated in terms of how big you can grow and how much cool work you can do out there. But I don't really think that's a future I want for myself, and I don't want to become a manager of creatives. Like, that removes me entirely from everything. And I know there's operational, like, CEOs that do all this stuff, or founders, or whatever you want to call it. But I think, like, what fulfills me long term, like, is the educational bit, helping other people get to where they want, or helping them find their niche, which I don't necessarily have a process for that right now, but that is a goal of mine. Once I'm like, I get enough street cred and people don't see me as like an industry asshole guru, like that is my number one like fear. I don't want to become that. I just want to help and like do what fulfills me, because I want to be able to, I have an LTV too. Like, I want to be able to do this for a long time as well.
Yeah.
So I got to do what's creatively fulfilling. But I think, yeah, it's interesting, like with tech now, that you can grow like other companies that use like automated ways to basically like take yourself and replicate yourself. And so I have some concepts of that we can get into maybe later, but that is a project I'm working on to kind of automate as much as possible, but still making a great product that people can receive that doesn't require a linear input of my time unit. So I don't know if that gives enough like information for you, but that's kind of my thought process.
Well, it's interesting, like, because so I follow a lot of like business owners and entrepreneurs online, and I follow a lot of developers too, because like a lot of people who start little, one-person startups, they're developers because it's just kind of easier to start a business that's based on software. And there's definitely a trend. I think it's been that way for probably 2-3 years, but with AI, it's just like accelerated like crazy, where you can have these one-person companies, but maybe they're paying someone offshore to do their support, and then they've got 7 AI models almost automating 80% of their marketing and doing all these things. And they can generate like really significant income by themselves. And, it's interesting to think about, because like the bigger a company gets, especially with studios, what I've seen so many times, if you start a studio, like let's say you started your sports graphics studio and you hired a few people, now there's 5 of you. Well, with 5 people, you're probably still doing a lot of the work, and you don't have to make like that much more. You don't have to like 10x your revenue to be able to support that, right? But then if you go from 5 people to like 10 or 15, all of a sudden everything changes, and there's like this trough in the middle where it's really hard to be profitable at a certain size, and you have to grow through that, and then on the other side you're profitable again. And I've seen that over and over again. Joel Pilger from Forum talks about that all the time. But now there's kind of another way, right? You can stay small intentionally, and you can probably be more efficient. You may end up having to use some dreaded AI tools to help you out in the end, or at least at the very least automation tools. Yeah. Actually, I want to ask you about that. I've kind of just been asking everybody who comes on the pod about what their thoughts on AI are. Like, have you dabbled? Are you for? Are you against? Are you in the middle?
Yeah, I would say I think I've seen enough of like videos that you put out. I would say we're pretty aligned on our opinion about AI. Like, I was hopeful that I hope it can execute some tasks that I don't want to do that are maybe less like creatively potent. But man, it's just not. The motion is so different, especially like brand specific motion, because you're dealing with all this red tape, and you can't show the logo inverted, and like all of these things. Like, man, I don't know if AI is going to be great at doing that. So I think there's going to be obviously like AI.
I suspect it won't be. Yeah, I suspect it won't be.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I could be totally wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. Like, I hope there's some tools that come out that are able to leverage up some more capability. But doesn't really replace a lot of creative work. It just leverages the more that you can like tap into internally. I use it a ton. I use Midjourney personally, just like on the side for fun, but also like if we need a 3D concept done and like we have to bring in a contractor, what I'll do is I'll come up with a cool concept that the team also like has input on, and we'll create style frames or concept frames in Midjourney. I think it's great for stuff like that, like concept stuff. But production level assets for sure. No, like, man, I don't know. Maybe in graphic design, on very niche things, but I don't think it's really going to be at the point to where it takes over jobs. But it will, like, it's great at doing business like admin stuff, and or coming up with the suggested thing that you can do online. But I don't know. People are also really good at like observing like artifacts, whether that's copy artifact or visual artifact of AI generated stuff. And like, if you're a luxury service, that matters. The details matter. So it's like, what are you putting out? Are you a business or an operation that is commoditized and is just meant to like broadcast to the millions? Which in that case, it's okay if you use a little AI. Like if people observe that you use AI, that's okay. Or are you a hyper niche specific thing, and brand is really important, and you need to double down on that, and like, almost it would be anti-brand growth to use AI in a way that could potentially hinder the quality of the output. So I think there's an intentional use of it. Like, you have to be intentional with, you don't want to just do it because it's more efficient. Like, what are you suggesting to people of the quality of your service while doing it? And I think there's a balance there, but I'm kind of sidelining everything and testing out tools, I would say, at this point.
I found the exact same thing, and I've actually heard, sort of AI experts talk about this, how AI has disrupted design. Like that's done. That's happened already. Because to create a beautiful still frame, you don't have to understand physics and all these other things, right? But the second that thing starts moving, now you're kind of comparing it to the way things move in the real world. And there's like this built-in intuition humans have that AI just doesn't have maybe yet. And who knows if it's capable of having that. You've probably seen the same sort of Sora videos and Kling videos and Luma AI and these, and it's amazing like that it's possible. But even when it's like someone walking and it just doesn't look quite right and there's no way to fix it, I'm like, we might be 25 years away from even this being able to,
it's like,
when it's like, if it's something not moving and the camera's orbiting around it, I don't know, maybe some of that stuff's already there, but for,
like revisions is tough. It's like, what's that? The uncanny valley. It's like, okay, we're 90% there, but that last 10% makes or break this entire thing. I think it's one of those things.
That's exactly it.
It's great for custom. I think I watched the most recent episode. Great for custom stock imagery. Like stock imagery, I'd be shaking my boots a little bit because you can just post more specific or generate more specific stock imagery assets and maybe like cityscape flyovers like you were talking about. But yeah, for hyper niche specific things, for sure, for motion design and higher art directed stuff, if someone wants that and you're a luxury highly art directed thing, your buyer, you don't want them to be like, well, how can I do this way cheaper? How can I do this for a 100th of the cost anyway? Like, so you don't want those people that would be looking for that element anyway if you're a luxury studio.
Yeah. This has been great, man. All right, so my last question for you, like, I think what I've kind of noticed following you online is, everyone's like kind of intrigued by the work you're doing because it's really cool when you see like 12 screens and they're all in sync. And then you see this kind of render of what it's going to look like in real life. And it's just, it's really fun to work on those projects and then go to the location and see your work, which I'm sure you've done many times. But I think like you're doing an even bigger service for motion design by talking publicly about the business stuff. And you've given a shitload of tips in this interview, dude. So there's a lot of younger artists that are going to watch this and they're going to look to you and they're going to say, well, your career looks a lot like the career I'd like to have. Maybe it's not in sports graphics, maybe it's in music or some other field. But they like this idea of being like hyper niched the way you are. So what advice would you give, a young artist watching this? Maybe they're still in college or maybe they're at their first job or internship, but they're thinking, okay, in 3 to 4 years, I want to be where Connor is. What advice would you give?
I would say like the goal was never to niche. The goal was just to like learn as much as possible, figure out what I like and reverse engineer something that I enjoy doing on a day-to-day basis. So that could be anything. That could be cooking. That could be like working out. That could be car stuff, or like, it could be like tech or whatever. But I would say like the thing that had helped me the most was like when I found the skill stack to where I'm like, okay, I can harp on this and begin to build a system out of that. What I found that was more energy giving was the active feedback loop of like testing something and getting a result, and then testing something and getting a different result that correlated to what that test was. When I was seeing how like the tests were working and like what outputs were changing based on the inputs, that's what like lit up a fire. And that could be for anything. So I think the wider accepted advice would just be operationalize everything, and like that niching helps for sure. But if you distill things down into a standard process, it just helps you so much. Like that you can get pulled in all these different directions. You have to have a really good no muscle is what I'm finding. So like develop your no muscle, because that is going to serve you tremendously. Like the more things you say no to is not a no in that, it's just saying yes to a bunch of other things too, like that you just don't know. And you need to have the confidence to like double down in that. And then, so that's one thing, no muscle, I would say, for younger people, maybe for older people that are wanting to niche down a little bit. The other thing would be to, like share your creativity online. Once you're at a point to where you feel like you have something to share, don't share something that is going to be out of your wheelhouse or you're just copy and pasting something else. Like you want to be original. If the goal is long-term growth, you want to find something that people aren't really talking about and you have an interest and you feel like you can help other people, and you want to be able to give abundantly and expect nothing in return. And you're going to accept, or you're going to receive eventually down the line, you're going to end up receiving things that like you would never thought that you could ask for by giving abundantly without expecting anything in return. And like social media is beautiful and it's ugly all at the same time, because it allows the ability to do that, but it also, you get all the flack that comes with it. So just be one of the great people online that helps other people abundantly, and you're going to end up like triple dipping in all these benefits of doing so. And I would say those are the two things that I found help me tremendously. And I would say that would be super helpful for other people. Know muscle and share your expertise online and creativity in a way that's authentic, and don't expect anything in return, because that's going to help you. Those two things are going to help you a lot.
Yeah. One follow-up. So I know a lot of people, because we post a lot at School of Motion, and so we've been we've been trolled, and every video we put out something says something nasty, and this is just like part of the internet, right? Like it's just kind of what happens, and you get used to it. But I know a lot of people that would benefit from doing what you're saying and sharing their work, sharing their process. They'd get more work, they'd get more eyeballs on them. But what they're afraid of is those nasty comments, because if you've never experienced it, it stings. It sucks, right? Like even after years of doing it, like it's not pleasant. So how do you deal with that? I mean, I don't know how much negativity you've actually experienced online, but I'm curious if you have any sort of philosophy around that, and how to take when you post something and someone says, quit shilling your own work, or whatever they might say. How do you deal with it?
Yeah, that's a great point. I would say, like, man, all that negativity, there's a ton of that. I'm fortunate enough not to really get much of that, because I just wanted, I don't understand why I don't get, maybe it's because of X. I would assume on Twitter or on Instagram and TikTok, I would get more, because there's this, people have the ability to like do that a little bit more. But man, like, screw those people. You're building your own life. So like, if it's my goal to free up my location ability, like be able to go travel, it's just have my computer, or if it's my ability to grow a business, it doesn't matter what other people think. I need to do what's necessary for myself and my future family, or my loved ones. And like, if I have people I need help, that is what's most important. Like, some other person behind a keyboard warrior elsewhere is not, like, if you're giving them the ability to get into your brain and to hinder your progress or your momentum, like, you're giving them power unnecessarily. They're nobody. They could be a bot. Like, you don't, man, it's your life. Like, this is what you're doing. And so it doesn't matter. Typically, it's also a good sign people are being negative to you. That means you're doing something right, because you're being polar and you're being extreme. So obviously, like, take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, it's your life. Like, take hold of it, take ownership of your life, and relentlessly pursue what's going to offer you the most amount of freedom and options in the future. And like, I feel like you're going to find like people like you on the way, and just like, do your thing, and just take hold of your life in that way, and don't care what other people think about it, and just post online. And like, you'd be surprised how many things that you can do that you thought that you would be uncomfortable with doing, but then you just kind of made it standard in your life, and now you don't think twice about it. Like, I don't think twice about sharing work online anymore. Like, it's not like, oh, I don't want to self-promote. It doesn't matter. You do it because it's what you need to do to unlock the freedom and the lifestyle that you want to live. So it doesn't matter if you like it or don't like it.
You can check out Connor's work at cjhvfx.com. And I want to thank Connor for coming on and for sharing all that amazing business knowledge, especially the stuff about marketing and sales, which is kind of a dark art. I think a lot of motion designers struggle with that. I learned a lot from talking with Connor. Hopefully you did too. So make sure that you're subscribed to this channel so you don't miss any of the other amazing guests we have coming up. Thank you as always for your attention, and I hope you learned something. I'll see you next time.